This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Hello and welcome. The Lebanese army deployed more soldiers in Beirut today after the killing of a demonstrator raised fears anti-government protests could turn into sectarian violence. Security sources said the military increased its forces in the Sunni district that Shiite protesters drive through to get to the central Beirut, where the Hezbollah opposition is holding the sit-in to topple the Faz Senura government. These districts witnessed several clashes between residents and protesters yesterday, from stone-throwing incidents to fights with sticks and knives to killing a man and wounding 13 others. May Fawaz reports.
A Shiite man was shot dead in the Sunni neighborhood of Kaskas on Sunday as he returned from a third day of protests against the government. Sources said gunmen had fired at a group who were returning from the protest through the Kaskas neighborhood of Beirut, killing the young man who was shot in the back with an automatic rifle. The dead man was named by family members as Ahmed Mahmoud, a 20-year-old member of the Amal movement. Earlier, army troops were able to arrest 3 Syrians from over a building rooftop near the Khashoggi Mosque in Kaskas after they attacked the security forces and people of the neighborhood with stones as a Hezbollah envoy was passing through. 3 Lebanese photographers working for An-Nahar, As-Safir and the Associated Press were injured. 13 other people were wounded in separate street clashes which focused around the neighborhood of Tariq Jdide and the Kaskas district. The army threw a security dragnet in Tariq Jdide in an effort to prevent Hezbollah and Amal followers from stirring up trouble in the Sunni neighborhood. The shooting death was the first reported since the opposition, spearheaded by Hezbollah and its allies, launched an open-ended sit-in with the aim of overthrowing Senura's government and forming a national unity government. Witnesses said sporadic bursts of automatic gunfire could be heard as Shiite and Sunni opponents fought with sticks and knives and threw stones at each other. Although the protests began over political differences, the country is moving closer to a sectarian crisis as tension between Sunnis and Shiites is high, and there is ill feeling among Christians who are divided between the rival camps.
Clara Jaha is joining us from the heart of Beirut to report about the latest news of the sit-in. Clara, what's going on with the sit-in today?
نعم كاترين، كما كان متوقعا اليوم الاثنين هو أول يوم عمل بعد في اليوم الرابع من التظاهرة.
Yes, Catherine. Today, Monday is the first working day of the week, and it is the 4th day of the sit-in.
تقريبا بدأ توافد المتظاهرين تزايد عددهم عما كان صباحا كما أيضا هو.
It was mainly calm today. More protesters started coming at 2 a.m. as we have been witnessing. Also, as expected, the sit-in organizers arranged for the protesters to participate from 6 until 9 so they can attend their schools, universities, and work. Today was calm, but as you can see, the number of the tents has increased to 400 in Riyadh al-Sulh and Martyr Square. This is an indication that the number of protesters will increase and that there will be more activities, especially because the tents that were erected today were designed to accommodate cultural and political activities as well as activities for women.
يبشر بزيادة النشاطات المقبلة، خصوصا أن الخيم التي يتم نصبها اليوم تعود لنشاطات ثقافية ولفعاليات سياسية ولنشاطات نسائية.
Protesters reacted to yesterday's martyrdom of Ali Ahmed Mahmoud. This was evident in the spontaneous demonstrations, which we will show you later. Soon we will be seeing the protests that took place throughout the sit-in areas.
علي أحمد محمود، وذلك بدا واضحا في المسيرات العفوية سنراها لاحقا. بعد قليل سنرى صور المسيرات التي
Catherine, what we can say now is that the schedule of the sit-in is not clear. As you know, the opposition wants to maintain the element of surprise, so they do not disclose everything. These are images of the sit-in that was held outside the presidential headquarters. People in the sit-in demanded that the government step down and condemned what happened yesterday. The protesters held images of the martyr Ali Ahmed Mahmoud. Let us hear some of their pleas and demands. What are you doing now?
هي منددة بما حصل البارحة. المتظاهرون حملوا صورة الشهيد علي أحمد محمود. نستطيع أن نستمع إلى نداءاتهم ومطالباتهم الآن.
We are not doing anything wrong. We want Senora to step down. We have been here for the past 3 days, but he did not even talk to us. I want to say only few words to Senora. Every poor has a God to help him. Every tree has God to provide it with water. But officials like Senora need the people to stand up for them.
He is the first martyr who fell for the sake of establishing a national unity government. We came here to dismantle the disloyal government of Senora. It is the government of the American ambassador Feltman. It is supervised by the Americans. Yesterday, this Lebanese government obtained the support of Israel.
Will the death of the protester affect you?
Of course, it will affect us. Everything will affect us, especially this martyrdom.
We are willing to sacrifice all the young men for the country. We have no problem doing that.
We, the Lebanese citizens, came here to bring down the government. This Lebanese government is the government of the American ambassador. I'm talking about the government that has Walid Uddu, Fuad Senora, Saad al-Hariri, and others.
I would like to ask, what is Senora still doing in the government? Hasn't he done enough? He wanted an international tribunal, and we agreed because most of the killers are from Senora's side. What else do they want? Wasn't the martyr a human being? He died for the sake of national unity. Senora is telling us that he is getting letters of support to use the presidential guard. So now he wants to use the presidential guards against the demonstration. He is more than welcome if he wants to do so. All of us will be staying here. We will stay here day and night. If Senora has some dignity left, why is he still not coming to see us? He says that he is concerned that we will cause economic losses to the country. If he is really concerned with the country, what is he still doing in the government? Did Bahia Hariri shed tears for what happened to the people? Even former Prime Minister Omar Karami resigned. So why doesn't Senora do the same? What is keeping him in office?
كاترين، هناك بعض لا أستطيع أن نقول شائعات، ولكن يتردد في الساحتين بين المخيمات عن ترقب استماع رسالة للسيد حسن نصر الله. ليس مؤكدا هذا.
There are rumors in the sit-in area that Hassan Nasrallah may give a speech after 6 p.m. However, this news has not been confirmed. Of course, there are talks about a festival in which the artist Julia may sing and the artist Ghassan Rahbani may also give a speech.
جوليا، وهناك كلمة للفنان غسان الرحباني.
نعم.
قال الجيش الأمريكي في بيان له إن أحد أفراد مشاة البحرية الأمريكية قتل.
According to the U.S. Army, one of its Marines was killed and 3 others are still missing when a helicopter with 16 servicemen on board made an emergency water landing in Haditha in western Iraq. The U.S. military said that the incident did not seem to be a result of enemy action. The incident is currently under investigation.
كما أعلن الجيش الأمريكي في بيان له أن 2 من جنوده قتلا وأصيب 2 آخران في انفجار عبوة ناسفة خلال عملية.
In another development, the U.S. Army confirmed that 2 of its soldiers were killed and 2 others were wounded in a roadside bomb explosion targeting a military convoy in northern Iraq, bringing the U.S. death toll to 2,894.
جدد الدكتور حارث الضاري رئيس هيئة.
Meanwhile, Dr. Harith Al-Dari, the head of Iraqi's Association of Muslim Scholars, reiterated his opposition to the Iraqi government and urged it to end the political process, saying that he will not be part of what he described as a U.S. occupation-sponsored government. He added that these ongoing political negotiations will give yet another opportunity to the U.S.-led occupation to destroy Iraq and eradicate the Iraqi people.
مطالبتنا بإنهاء العملية السياسية بصرف النظر عن الحكومة أو من يحكم الآن. العملية السياسية التي جاء بها الاحتلال.
Regardless of what type of government is currently in power in Iraq, we demanded to end the political process. This political process, which was proposed by the U.S. occupation to the Iraqi government, has become a tool of destruction, intimidation, and division in Iraq. In addition, it brought bloodshed and horror to the Iraqi people and caused division among its various ethnic groups. It is based on faulty foundations, especially in regard to sectarian power sharing in Iraq.
Meanwhile, Iraq's Criminal High Court reconvened today in Baghdad to hear more witness testimonies in the trial of the former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein's Anfal case of 1988. In its previous session, the court heard the testimonies of foreign criminal experts who took part in digging out some of the many Kurdish mass graves. In today's session, several prosecutors' witnesses testified that the former Iraqi regime used chemical weapons against the Kurds in 1988. In addition, many Kurds in northern Iraq were subjected to an elaborate scheme of torture, detention, rape, persecution, and mass killings.
كشفت وسائل الإعلام الأمريكية.
The U.S. media reported that the Baker-Hamilton Commission of the Iraq Study Group will recommend the withdrawal of most American troops from Iraq. The report, which is expected to be released on Wednesday, will urge Bush to involve Syria and Iran to bring security back to Iraq. The commission will also recommend handing over security to Iraqi forces, but a time frame for the pullout has not been specified.
في ظل خسارة الحزب الجمهوري بزعامة الرئيس الأمريكي جورج بوش انتخابات الكونغرس النصفية التي اعتبرت استفتاء على
After the Republican Party headed by American President George Bush lost the U.S. congressional elections, the Iraq Study Group, co-chaired by former U.S. Secretary of State James Baker and former Democratic Representative Lee Hamilton, will release a report about American foreign policies in Iraq. It is expected that this report, which was prepared by a group of 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, will provide U.S. President George Bush with a political cover to reconsider his policies in Iraq as security steadily deteriorates in the country.
تزداد الفوضى الأمنية في هذا البلد. ورغم أن عمل المجموعة اتسم بالسرية المطلقة، إلا أن تسريبات نشرتها صحيفة نيويورك تايمز قالت فيها إن المجموعة متفقة على ضرورة عقد
Even though the group worked in secrecy, some information was leaked to the New York Times, which reported that the group agreed on the necessity to hold a regional conference that includes Iraq's neighbors in order to find ways to end the violence in the country. They are also advising Bush to open up new venues for dialogue with Iran and Syria. While the group is divided on the issue of time for the withdrawal of the American occupation forces from Iraq, Democrat Senator Jack Reed believes that the group will reach an agreement soon. The New York Times reported that the group specified its mission and proposed solutions for the Iraqi situation to the U.S. government.
تايمز قالت إن المجموعة حددت مهمتها بعرض اقتراحات حلول على الحكومة الأمريكية للوضع العراقي.
Let me say that the Commission reached a consensus on the options the U.S. has for its policies in Iraq. Its findings will be announced in a press conference on December 6.
ويتعرض
Bush faces increasing pressure from inside and outside to implement a new policy to prevent Iraq from slipping into a civil war and to enable the U.S. occupation forces to withdraw honorably.
من العراق.
U.S. citizens and families of American servicemen who have lost their lives in the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan have built a symbolic cemetery in the coast of Seattle to honor the memory of their loved ones. The cemetery, showcasing the pictures of U.S. casualties in the two Asian wars, has turned into a meeting place which attracts Americans every Sunday.
And the war that George Bush started on Iraq is a diversion from the war on terror. It made some sense to go into Afghanistan because that's where bin Laden was, but to turn around and invade Iraq, which was totally unrelated.
Many soldiers have come back home and have committed suicide after they've returned, so they're not actually considered a war casualty.
The danger of violence has increased for Afghans today amidst confrontation between the Taliban movement, NATO forces, and the Afghan government. Resuming their suicide attacks, the Taliban killed 2 civilians with a booby-trapped car in Kandahar, their stronghold in southern Afghanistan. One of the NATO soldiers who was targeted in the suicide attack panicked when he randomly began firing his gun into the air in what appears to be a more daring Taliban operation. The movement announced today that it had downed a NATO helicopter in Kandahar. NATO and Afghan government operations against the movement have not ceased. 10 members of the Taliban were killed in a battle in the Musa Qala area in southern Afghanistan.
A Taliban suicide bomber once again struck in Kandahar, the stronghold of the Taliban movement in southern Afghanistan. The target this time was a NATO military convoy, which was attacked by a suicide bomber driving a booby-trapped car. 2 civilians were killed and 2 military vehicles were destroyed by the explosion. However, the members of the convoy raised the tally of the victims by killing 5 other people. They fired randomly in the air amidst the chaos that followed the car explosion.
All of a sudden, I heard a frightening noise. I got out fast and saw members of the foreign forces removing their comrades from inside the destroyed military vehicles that had black smoke rising from them. I saw that 5 civilians had been killed. I don't know how many people were wounded.
The Taliban claimed responsibility for the attack and vowed to carry out more. Despite the intensified NATO forces campaigns, the Taliban have not been weakened. It should be noted that the Taliban fighters have increased their attacks this year and have increased the use of suicide operations, which Afghans have not been accustomed to. It appears that the Taliban, by increasing suicide operations, the preferred method of its ally Al-Qaeda, is implementing a plan to escalate the confrontations with Western forces and the Afghan government in a war of attrition that it seeks to prolong. It appears that the movement is depending on its stamina. It is convinced that the NATO forces are fighting in unfamiliar territory and that in the end these forces will give up and leave when faced with increased deadly attacks and the movement's continued ability to recruit more fighters. This comes at a time when President Hamid Karzai's government is unable to expand its authority further than the capital of Kabul. It seems that NATO has been challenged further by the latest attacks, including the downing of the helicopter, which NATO acknowledged disappeared on Saturday. This helicopter incident comes only 2 days after the Latvia summit, during which NATO pledged to continue its support to the Kabul government and to eliminate the Taliban. Nevertheless, NATO insists on breaking the back of the Taliban, despite the fact that this incident coincided with the Latvia summit, whose members reluctantly agreed to send more forces to Afghanistan, as requested by the United States. The increase in NATO forces is expected to increase the intensity of confrontations in a country that has been exhausted by wars, poverty, and misery. Meanwhile, the human toll continues to rise with time. Nearly 4,000 Afghans have died this year.
Prime Minister Ehud Olmert defended the truce in Gaza today, saying it will help create a momentum that will lead to a diplomatic process. Olmert said that Israel is, quote, temporarily having difficulty stopping the fire of Qassam rockets militarily, and therefore must keep the ceasefire going so long as it results in a decrease of rocket attacks. Olmert said the military campaign did not stop the Qassams. Opposition MKs blasted the prime minister, saying it was an admission that he could not protect residents from Qassams and is proof that by using rockets, Hamas has extorted this ceasefire from Israel and is using it to serve its own purposes. IBA's Eli Wagalanter was in the Knesset today and asked committee members whether the ceasefire can be extended to the West Bank.
He didn't say that, but practically we know that instructions already have been given to the army and that the freedom of maneuver and the activity, which was very aggressive until now, will be significantly reduced.
I think at the moment my sense is that the government would like to exercise restraint and to give it, my understanding is that we want to give it a real chance and perhaps even to extend it further to the West Bank.
I believe that it is a big mistake to keep the ceasefire only in Gaza and not to have something like that on the West Bank, believing that one can separate between Gaza and the West Bank and have a ceasefire in Gaza and not to have it on the West Bank.
What did you say about the West Bank?
I think that he gave us a kind of a passive impression, meaning that, well, if there is something like this, it won't be bad. I'm not quoting, rather than saying it is in the interest of Israel to have a ceasefire in the West Bank, because this is the way to cease fire. We didn't invent something else.
Actually, the Prime Minister was telling to us today something that is completely inconceivable from Israeli point of view. That since we are unable to protect our citizens in Sderot vis-à-vis rockets, we have to agree to a ceasefire that is extremely beneficial to our enemies. Our view is that we can do more, that we have to use the violence and the shooting in order to change direction and to go immediately to a massive ground operation in Gaza against the terrorist infrastructure.
Soldiers in Gaza are no longer permitted to open fire on Qassam rocket launchers in Gaza without specific orders from senior officers. These and other new rules of engagement were given to security forces at this week's cabinet meeting, and IDF field officers are not pleased. Dennis Zinn reports.
IDF forces continued operations in Judea and Samaria overnight. 15 wanted terrorists were arrested. Most were Hamas activists. This despite the ongoing debate within the government and the security establishment on the one hand, and the different Palestinian groups on the other, as whether or not to extend the ceasefire to the West Bank. Yesterday, the army was instructed to stop targeting Qassam rocket launchers in the Gaza Strip, even if they continue to fire missiles at Israel. The order annoyed officers in the Southern Command, who said that the Palestinian terror groups will simply take advantage of the Israeli restraint to replenish their capabilities. Defense Minister Amir Peretz and Interior Minister Avi Dichter, who was the previous head of the General Security Services, sided with the IDF to oppose the ceasefire, both in Gaza and the West Bank. But they were outvoted by the rest of the cabinet. Officers in the Central Command today said there have been no real changes in the operational orders, except that units in the field should try and prevent activities that may spark mass violence, such as arresting a wanted terrorist in a town center during the day or carrying out the demolition of a home. On the Palestinian side, the heads of the different factions met overnight to discuss extending the ceasefire. The Hamas representative did not participate and announced that Hamas has not yet reached a decision. Palestinian commentators said Hamas is using its vote whether or not to abide by the ceasefire to pressure PA chairman Abu Mazen to restart talks on the establishment of a unity government. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
Iran's nuclear program and what to do about it will top the agenda when diplomats from Britain, China, France, Russia, the United States, Germany, and the European Union gather in Paris tomorrow. The parties are struggling to draft a UN resolution regarding sanctions against the hardline Islamic country for its refusal to halt the enrichment of uranium, a key step in the manufacture of atomic bombs. Meanwhile, if the parliament in Iran has its way, the term of President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad will be shortened by nearly 1.5 years. Lawmakers voted overwhelmingly to combine the next presidential ballot with parliamentary elections scheduled for February 2008. Ahmadinejad's term does not expire until June 2009. The decision must be ratified by the Iranian Constitutional Committee, headed by former President Hashemi Rafsanjani, viewed by many as a rival of Ahmadinejad.
وسط حضور كثيف لكبار نجوم السينما المصرية وحشد كبير من النقاد.
In the midst of a huge gathering of Egyptian movie stars, international film critics, and foreign guests, Egyptian Minister of Culture Farouk Hosni inaugurated Cairo's 30th International Film Festival on Wednesday evening. Hosni was greeted with endless cheering and clapping in what appears to be a gesture of support after he sparked controversy with his comments regarding Muslim veiling, saying it was a step backward for Egyptian women. This is the first time that 7 digital films will be shown at the festival. A special segment was dedicated to Latin American films, and many international movie and music stars attended. They were impressed both by the logistics of the event and the quality of the works being shown.
أفلام عدة يشاهدها بشغف رواد مهرجان القاهرة السينمائي، وقد اكتظت صالاته بجمهور متنوع الاهتمامات، إلا أن هناك شخصية رسمية مصرية.
Many movies will be shown at the Cairo International Film Festival. Many people attended the event, but it was an Egyptian personality which became the center of attention in the festival's opening. It was Minister of Culture Farouk Hosni, who recently made negative comments about the Muslim hijab. This year's festival is dedicated to the late Egyptian novelist and Nobel Prize laureate Naguib Mahfouz. A documentary about his life and work was shown. The Brazilian film Two Sons of Francisco by director Breno Silveira was a favorite among the international audience. The film tells the story of 2 boys from a poor Brazilian family on their road to folk music stardom.
فقيرة يتجه 2 من أبنائها إلى عزف الموسيقى وأداء الأغاني الريفية.
I'm indeed fascinated. Since I was a little girl, I've been fascinated by Egyptian culture, always fascinated. This is not a normal thing. It's such an old culture. It's a fascinating culture.
Excited by the festival, excited to be here. The festival is a chance for the Egyptians to celebrate themselves and their culture, saying, we are here in the world and this is our contribution.
القاهرة في هذه الدورة 165 فيلما من 51 دولة من بين
165 films from 51 countries will be shown at this year's Cairo Festival. 18 films are part of the international competition, including 4 Egyptian films. In addition, 7 Arabic movies will compete against one another, including 2 Tunisian films and 1 film each for Saudi Arabia, Oman, United Arab Emirates, and Morocco. The prize for Best Arabic Movie is estimated at $20,000. For the first time, 7 digital movies will compete in the festival.
I am both nervous and happy. Why nervous? Because your responsibility as an actor increases.
Yes, I invited some of the international stars that are here today. Some of them are my friends.
Syrian veteran actor Doraid Laham is heading the judging committee for the Best Arabic Movie competition. The judging committee for Best Digital Movie is being headed by Egyptian director Dawood Abdel Sayed. What was noticeable was the absence of many young Egyptian movie stars who have dominated Egyptian cinema for the last few years. However, there were other stars who never failed to show up at the festival every year.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Feyerdahl Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.